the session, but this is the title of our session. I'm Anna Maria Mandalari from London, as you can see from my very British accent. Before starting, just a reminder that the session is being recorded and your participation in the session is an implicit consent to being recorded, for example, for the Q&A. If you want to ask a question, as before, please feel free to write the question in Slack or raise your hand, and we will enable your microphone for asking the question directly, or I can read basically the question from Slack. We have only 2 talks in this session, but they are very exciting talks. The first one is long-lasting sequences of BGP updates, presented by Lorenzo Ariemma. Lorenzo is currently a PhD student at the Department of Engineering at Roma 3 University under the supervision of Professor Giuseppe Di Battista. He receives his master's degree at the same university, and his research interests include computer networks, in particular interdomain routing, network emulation, and data center routing protocols. So let's see Lorenzo's talk with you. Thank you.
My name is Lorenzo Ariemma, and I'm going to present the paper Long-Lasting Sequences of BGP Updates. This work is a collaboration with my colleagues Simone Liotta, Massimo Candela, and Giuseppe Di Battista. BGP is the protocol for interdomain routing. Various routers in the internet communicate through BGP, exchanging routing information. This routing information basically allows us to communicate between 2 points across different networks comprising the internet. In general, we know that an event in the internet causes the generation of BGP updates for a short period of time. But we also know that this doesn't always happen, and sometimes instability appears. For example, look at this specific case we found. This is a chart showing the number of updates received by that collector peer, that is an observation point that captures BGP updates, and for that specific prefix. It is clear, even just from this 3-day window, that we see an instability starting from the 19th of February. But what happens next? What's going on here? Now the view is expanded to a 10-day window, and we can see that the collector peer is still receiving those updates. This is a 1-month window, and not only is still receiving updates, but their quantity increases. How much time will pass until it stops? Let's check out. We need to reach the 30th of September to see the end of this sequence. This specific sequence lasts 223 days before stopping. This is exactly what we are interested in this paper. So in particular, we are interested in long-lasting sequences of BGP updates, basically long-lasting instabilities where long-lasting is above 1 week. Now the question is easily asked, is this an isolated case? No. In the whole 2019, we found over 400,000 sequences like this one. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, what is a long-lasting sequence? Well, from our point of view, a long-lasting sequence is a sequence of BGP updates that exhibits the following features: the sparse presence of samples with a non-zero amplitude, non-stationary and extremely volatile stochastic process, long-term correlation, memory effects, self-similar behavior, and that lasts more than a week. To extract the sequences, we used all the collector peers from RIPE-RIS route collector 0. We choose this route collector because it has its collector peers spread all over the world, so we can have better visibility on what is really happening on the network, without having biases about where the observation points are located. We analyzed, with a very fast MRT parser, a total amount of 29 billion BGP updates, over 2 terabytes of data. To explain our methodology, I will present a very small running example. For a rigorous explanation, please read our paper. So, for each possible pair of collector peer and prefix, we count the number of updates received in each second. Then we perform an oversampling and a low-pass filter. The result of this step is a signal with 1 as maximum level and with a 0 after each sample, doubling its length. Finally, we compute the discrete wavelet transform scalogram. A scalogram is a matrix containing the power of the signal divided into frequency bands. The light blue indicates where the signal has no power at all. Instead, a cell, for example the red one, indicates the power of the signal at second 30 in level 4. To be more precise, in figure are reported the frequencies associated to level 4. Then, for each column of the scalogram, we compute the variance. We find a sequence if the variance is greater than 0 for a period longer than a week. Our analysis showed that in the whole 2019, the 400,000 sequences can be divided across about 200,000 different prefixes and involves more than 25,000 different autonomous systems origin. Totally, they are the cause of more than 8 billion BGP updates, a little lesser than the 30% of the updates observed in the whole year. All the sequences can be viewed and further analyzed from our website, bgpi.net. To help you visualize the sequences, we created several visualization tools. Now I'm going to present just 3 of them, but there are a lot more on the website. The first one is the sequence chart. It shows a specific pair of collector peer and prefix and the number of messages received over time. 2 red bars delimit the sequence selected, and other sequences from that same pair are also shown. This chart is zoomable, and the resolution is automatically adjusted till a 5 minutes resolution. The next one is the AS tree. This chart shows all the AS paths that are viewed during a specific sequence. The part thickness indicates the number of updates received with that specific AS path. Observe that all the paths end with the same autonomous system. This because it's the collector peer from where the updates are received. This last visualization is the segment chart. It can be opened from each one of the 172 collector peers. It shows all the sequences from that collector peer. Each row is a specific prefix. Due to the high amount of data, the prefixes are not shown. Please visit our website, bgpi.net, to deeply dig our data and also to discover all the other statistical analysis and visualization tools that are not presented here. The website also offers several filtering tools to easily find the sequences of your interest. In conclusion, we developed a method to extract long-lasting sequences from BGP updates. We implemented such method using open source code that can be found on GitLab, and analyzing 1 year of BGP updates, we were able to find more than 400,000 sequences. 28% of processed BGP updates belong to long-lasting sequences, so this is not isolated, and further research should be granted to this topic. Thank you for watching my talk. Further information is of course in the paper. These are our contacts if you want to exchange ideas. If you have any questions, I am here for you.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. The paper addresses a relevant problem, and it's also very nice that you're making all source code and datasets available to the community. Thank you for this. So I saw that we have already some questions in Slack from Clemens Mossig. Did you observe any differences between IPv4 and IPv6?
Okay, hi. Thank you for the question. Well, actually, the difference is not so high because 59% of the sequences belong to an IPv4 prefix, while the remaining belong to an IPv6. Now, assuming that in the internet, the IPv4 prefixes are much more than the IPv6, I mean, there are 800,000 IPv4, while there are 100,000 IPv6, more or less. I assume that this phenomenon is a little bit more visible on the IPv6, but still the greater percentage is still on the IPv4 world.
Okay, thank you very much, Lorenzo. Another question from Clemens again. Did you observe any specific characteristics about these prefixes, such as a similar geographic origin or identical upstream?
Actually, we ran the numbers about the origin of that specific prefix, but they are spread over 25,000 origin autonomous systems. So this is not something that can be grouped on. The goal of this paper was to find out the sequences and to show to the community that even in BGP, that is a protocol that has been out in the wild for years, for decades, there are still some problems, and those problems can have consequences on the user navigation or the user experience. We didn't run any we didn't run any source code analysis for these sequences.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Yeah, we have another question from Lars Pran. If a prefix is globally reachable, there is a high likelihood that any central topological change produces an update, at least somewhere. Given that, what do I gain from knowing that a prefix continuously receives updates?
Well, a prefix that is continuously not receiving but emitting updates, and are all the others in the internet that are receiving updates, can have various problems, because some of these sequences we can see that they are constantly changing their AES path. So the traffic is constantly changing between paths and autonomous systems. This can have problems with the traffic that is going over those links. Other sequences are alternating announces and withdrawals. So there are a small period of times in between that prefix is not reachable. So the traffic for that prefix is dropped or black holed by someone during the path. This can create a lot of problems, those sequences. I mean, if there are sure some sequences that receive a long quantity of updates, but where those updates are quite identical. And in that case, there won't be problems for the user experience, but even for the network operator, having a BGP router that is constantly receiving a lot of updates can be hurtful for their CPU. I mean, the updates received needs to be processed. And if those are useless, why using the CPU of the routers to process those updates instead of doing something else, like routing traffic?
Good point. I see that there is a lot of activities in Slack. We can take just a last question, and then maybe you can continue answering there. We have a question from Giovanni Mora saying, do you have any hypotheses about why this happens with so many autonomous systems?
The real answer is no. We don't have, well, we have some hypotheses, but we found out for specific case that we analyzed in very detail. But from this large amount of sequences that we found, we don't know which are the causes. We wanted to find them and to address the community, because those sequences are out and are free to be used on our website. And you can browse the website and see the contents, filter the sequences, and you can see that there are really a lot. So the important part is that they are there. and they need to be studied. They need to be find the reasons because they appear.
Yeah, correct. Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Can obviously continue the conversation in Slack. And let's go.
Thank you. All the others that are asking questions.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the other talk, the last one for today. The paper is on the resilience of the internet infrastructures in the Pacific Northwest to earthquakes, presented by Juno Meyer. Juno is a 2021 graduate of the University of Oregon, where he studied computer science, math, and music technology. During his time at the University of Oregon, Juno completed an undergraduate honor thesis in internet management in collaboration with UO's Oregon Network Research Group and the Department of Earth Sciences. Juno's research seeks to assess the resilience of the internet infrastructure in the Pacific Northwest against the impending Cascadia earthquake. So let's see the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juno Meyer, and today I'd like to talk to you about the resilience of internet infrastructures in the Pacific Northwest with respect to earthquakes. The physical internet is composed of nodes and links. Nodes can take the form of data centers, co-locations, and more. Short and long-haul fiber optic links transfer data between metro areas and across continents via submarine installations. These infrastructures play a crucial role in our day-to-day activities and public safety. For example, earthquake warning systems rely on internet infrastructures to effectively detect, respond to, and recover from earthquakes. Here we can see the internet infrastructure in the Pacific Northwest. It is home to many cloud providers and thousands of miles of metro, long-haul, and submarine fiber optic cables. This area is also home to the Cascadia subduction zone, shown here in yellow off the west coast. This tectonic setting poses a significant hazard to the region. Predictions show a significant chance of a high-magnitude earthquake occurring in the Pacific Northwest within the next 50 years. In this talk, we will explore the potential impacts of such an earthquake on internet infrastructures in the Pacific Northwest. Currently, few studies have considered the effects of earthquake damage on internet infrastructures, and none have been localized in the Pacific Northwest. This is due to two key issues. First is the paucity of high-quality internet infrastructure maps that reveal associated risks, such as conduit sharing among providers and outages due to natural disasters. Second is the interdisciplinary nature of this problem. It's not fully known what the impacts of shaking and seismic hazard are on internet infrastructure, even from past earthquakes, due to the lack of collaborative efforts between network measurements and earth science communities. To tackle this problem, we have devised ShakeNet, an ArcGIS-based framework to study the impacts of earthquake-induced shaking on internet infrastructures. ShakeNet consists of three key components. First, we categorize internet infrastructures into risk groups using earthquake intensity measurements. Then, we assess the extent of shaking-induced damages to internet infrastructures. Lastly, we identify alternate routes to mitigate the damages. To categorize, ShakeNet merges two datasets using ArcGIS's overlap capability. Dataset 1 consists of geocoded internet infrastructure. For nodes, we look at points of presence, internet exchange points, co-location facilities, and submarine landing stations. For links, we consider long-haul and metro fiber conduits and submarine cables from various providers. Dataset 2 consists of peak ground acceleration data from the USGS National Seismic Hazard Maps. There are two sets of this data, expected peak ground acceleration in the next 50 years at 10% and at 2%. These datasets are broken up into risk categories based on the modified Mercalli index. As a quick aside, let's first define the modified Mercalli index and peak ground acceleration before proceeding. The modified Mercalli index is used to categorize earthquakes by their perceived shaking and resulting damages. We use this scale to estimate damages to internet infrastructures. According to the USGS, peak ground acceleration is the largest increase in velocity recorded by a particular station during an earthquake. It is measured as a fraction of Earth's gravity. PGA ranges are correlated with intensity levels on the MMI scale. We use this correlation to identify infrastructure risk and pinpoint risk-prone areas given our predictive PGA data. Earthquakes begin to cause structural damage at MMI intensity 6, which is correlated with PGA values between 0.092 G and 0.18 G. Thus, we are primarily concerned with infrastructures located in areas with PGAs of 0.092 G or greater. This data opens a novel perspective of risk management. of maximizing the traffic carried via portions of fiber in the areas with low PGA values and minimizing traffic through high PGA values where risk is high. This brings us to step 2, the assessment of shaking-induced damages. We assess the extent of damages in 2 steps. Step 1 is assessing risks to infrastructure using our predictive PGA data. Rasterized PGA data is imported into ArcGIS and contoured into discrete bands based on our PGA MMI risk groups. Here we can see the raw raster form on the left and the contoured form on the right superimposed over Washington and Oregon. We then overlap our internet infrastructure data sets onto the contoured areas. Note that the vast majority of infrastructure is concentrated into metro areas, in particular Seattle, Washington, and Portland and Eugene, Oregon. On the left, we see our fiber and node data overlaid onto the 2% PGA scenario. We then programmatically count the infrastructures that overlap with the various risk groups. We see here that nodes are prone to shaking ranging from strong to very strong on the MMI index at a 10% probability of exceedance, and very strong to severe at a 2% probability of exceedance. We see here that in the next 50 years, 65% of fiber infrastructures in the Pacific Northwest have a 10% chance of experiencing very strong shaking and a 2% chance of experiencing severe shaking. Over 3,000 miles of fiber have a 2% chance of being subjected to violent shaking in the next 50 years. Our analysis suggests that infrastructure providers with fiber assets in the very strong to violent risk groups should consider alternate backup paths with less earthquake hazards. Looking at individual providers, we find that Spectrum Business is at the highest risk, followed by Zayo and Integra. By considering population density of metropolitan areas, we can then reason about the level of impact that infrastructure outages would have on society. We sort metropolitan areas by average PGA, population density, and infrastructure concentration to obtain a combined risk ranking. We show that the Seattle and Portland metro areas are at risk of damages of both fiber, node, and cell towers. Future hardening or diversification of infrastructure efforts should consider these metro areas. To mitigate risks to infrastructure, we use our PGA data and our fiber cable data to create a route planning functionality in which we identify alternate paths to reroute traffic through safer areas. Due to the high concentration of fiber cables within high PGA areas, alternate routes which mitigate PGA between Pacific Northwest metro areas are almost always longer than the current risk-prone routes. This creates an interesting trade-off between network safety and performance. Our route planning techniques can be used in the short term to identify alternate routes in current infrastructure, and in the long term to identify new infrastructure deployment locations which minimize risk. In an application of our route planning technique, we find alternate paths between Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. Here we can see an example of the trade-off between performance and safety. A route through Yakima, Washington, and Kennewick, Oregon decreases risk by 16% in the 10% likely scenario and 11% in the 2% likely scenario. A route through Spokane, Washington, and Boise, Idaho decreases risk by 25% in the 10% likely scenario and 22% in the 2% likely scenario. In future work, we can combine ShakeNet with the ShakeAlert early warning system to reroute traffic to maintain critical internet functionality. ShakeNet can also be used to explore multi-hazard events, such as aftershocks from an earthquake followed by a tsunami. ShakeNet can also be extended to a performance-based earthquake engineering paradigm to provide measurable assessments of the potential seismic performance of infrastructures. Thank you for attending my talk on the ShakeNet framework, and have a great day.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Juno. This was a very interesting presentation. I really like the interdisciplinary aspect of the paper. Let's see if we have questions in Slack. So Giovanni Moura say, very neat idea to combine those data sets. Just for curiosity, how Pacific Northwest compares to Japan in terms of earthquakes and infrastructure deployment?
Hi there. So I believe that we have in the Pacific Northwest, we have a high amount of infrastructure as well as a large earthquake risk. But I believe Japan has a greater risk of earthquakes and has, like, in recent history, undergone stronger earthquakes, as the Pacific Northwest has sort of been quiet for a long period of time there. And I also imagine that there's a large amount of infrastructure concentration in Japan as well. So they're both pretty high risk areas, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see if we have any other questions. Yeah, we have a comment from Simone. Very neat idea to add artists to this sort of problem analysis. If there are no other questions, I have a question. So what exactly do you suggest for this? So an alternative route as a new route, or do you think like fail-safe paths should be built?
I think that fail-safe paths should be built as a means of maximizing connectivity in the event of a catastrophic earthquake scenario. I also think that it's there's, I think, certainly opportunity for future hardening with new deployments as well.
Okay, thank you very much. There are other questions from Giovanni Mora. Did you show these results to these ops folks in the area?
Not yet, no.
Okay, maybe for the future it will be nice. We have another question from Andra. Which are some alternative infrastructures that could ensure communications during critical times, for example, after an earthquake? Satellite, drones?
Yeah, definitely. Another one is we were looking at cell towers and cell tower communication, as well as hardening, in future work, hardening cell towers to provide a sort of like communication backbone in the event that fiber optics were disconnected between metro areas.
Question, I think the last one from Randy. Considering the Pacific coasts are rightly known as the ring of fire, are there alternate safe paths?
Yeah, well, there are alternate paths that sort of traverse through or make a further deviation from the Pacific coast, but I think at that point we are getting into the territory of having of introducing almost like too much of a latency delay. I think that it's a matter of mitigating risk, not necessarily have like I think at this time there is no known solution that produces a perfectly safe path without like significantly deviating from the West Coast, which is part of the one of the things that I find so interesting about this problem.
Very good point. Thanks again, Juno. Thanks the speakers. Obviously, you can continue the conversation in Slack. And I think for today, that's all. Thank you, the organizing committee, for the amazing job today. And thank you, the audience, for staying until the last session. I understand that maybe in some part of the world it's really late. See you all tomorrow and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you.